Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. This is Ryan Crodel at Valencell. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here for what should be a fascinating webinar. We've still got quite a few people coming in through the webinar interface, so we're going to get started here in another minute or so to let everyone get in and get settled. So I'll be back in another minute or so to kick off and get going. Thanks again for attending. All right, it looks like we have leveled off a bit in terms of the attendees coming in, so we'll go ahead and get started here. We are really excited to have Jon Coble with us, who's CEO and co-founder of GOGO Band, and I will hand over to Jon. He's going to cover most of the material we have prepared for you today to share a bit about his company and the journey his company has taken from initial concept all the way through to the solution they are bringing to market. And it's a fascinating case study and use case for biometric sensor technology, which is why we wanted to bring it to you. It's certainly not something that we at Valencell would have ever predicted that our technology would be used for, but we're certainly glad to see it contributing to such a good cause and really helping children and their families live better lives. So we're really excited about that and very happy to be part of a small part of, but a part of this this overall solution. A few quick housekeeping items before we dive in. First and foremost, we are recording this webinar, and we'll make that recording available to everyone who's attending and everyone who registered. But if you have colleagues or anyone else you might think that you think might be interested in hearing this, please feel free to share the link with them. We will also make the slides available on SlideShare, as we always do. And you'll receive a follow-up email shortly shortly following the webinar with all of that information. And we, just in terms of logistics through the webinar itself, we will be taking questions as they go. So please do submit your questions through the GoToWebinar control panel. And I will jump in and address those questions or address those questions to Jon and have him answer them as we go along. So as you think of them, or if you want us to dive deeper on any of the areas that we cover here, please do submit a question and we'll take those as they come. We've also got time built in at the end of the session here for Q&A as well. So we like to keep these as interactive as possible. So if you've got a question or would like more information on anything, please jump in. So with that, I will at this point go ahead and hand over to Jon, and Jon's going to take us through the presentation, introduce his company and the problem they're addressing and how they're going about doing that. So Jon, over to you.
Good morning, Ryan. Thank you very much. And thank you, all the people out there in the virtual world, for taking some time out of your day to spend an hour having us describe what we consider to be a real innovation in the healthcare market. Again, my name is Jon Coble. I'm the founder and CEO of GOGO Band. And what we are doing at GOGO Band is really what we consider to be the next big data frontier for biometric wearables. If you think about it, wearables and IoT devices are really ideally positioned to transform the management of chronic illnesses and diseases and represent what we feel is really one of the biggest opportunities for the digital world to disrupt the entire healthcare industry. Just think about it. In less than 5 years, biometric data collected from wearable sensors on human health can now be collected at a level and scale that was never before possible. And when you combine that with the accelerating innovations in machine learning and adaptive algorithms, it provides us with credible and what we call actionable insight, empowering us to make some really significant changes so that we may work towards a better, longer, and healthier life. This slide talks a little bit about what we see in that big data frontier, both predictive models and prescriptive models. Predictive models enable us to detect an impending health-related event before it happens. Prescriptive models intervene for that person to prevent an impending event from even happening. There's also what we consider significant underlying benefit from the data itself. With the rise of cloud-based technologies, wearable devices certainly someday will make the recording of your health metrics available to all sorts of healthcare professionals, whether it's your doctor, a surgeon, you name it. And when combined with lab diagnostics that are typically done today and other medical information, your wearable data becomes part of your electronic medical record. And ultimately, your doctor will have more information to not only keep you healthy, but help detect medical problems as they develop. So what is the GOGO Band opportunity? We are the first biometric wearable solution to help stop bedwetting in children. Bedwetting is clinically known as pediatric enuresis. It's also the #1 chronic health condition in children worldwide that affects over 300 million children across the globe. And in the USA alone, there's over 8.5 million children ages 5 to 18 in the US that suffer from enuresis. That's about 1 in 5 children. And for me personally, my little brother suffered from bedwetting the entire 18 years of his childhood, and our family saw firsthand the devastating impact that this has on children. Sadly, technical innovation in this market has been pretty stagnant for the last 30, 40 years, and current treatments are really ineffective. It's interesting as we've been marching down this road of building our solution that when you talk to people, if you think about it, 1 out of 5 children suffer from enuresis. That means that almost everybody probably knows some family or has a family member or experienced it themselves. And current treatments, as I say, are very ineffective. So we've got a patent pending big data solution, which is going to be a game changer, we feel, for these kids. So why is bedwetting so devastating? This is what we call our constellation of pain. And you can see that there are severe psychological and physical implications for a child, ranging from major depression to low self-esteem. And one of the real shocking things that we found in our research is that when you look at teenage, particularly boy suicides, that enuresis is the most leading single variable to predict teenage suicide in boys. And when you look at some of the family and social elements, bullying, ostracization at school, a financial drain on the family, and in fact, about 1 in 4 kids are actually abused or neglected by their parents. And when you poll children and you ask them what they fear the most, or what is the most traumatic thing that they can think of, only blindness or the death of a parent is more traumatic to a child. To me, this really reminds me of this unspoken taboo topic, which really is not socially talked about out there in the world. It reminds me a lot of what Betty Ford did for breast cancer, in saying that she had breast cancer, what Bob Dole did for prostate cancer, and in fact, what Ronald Reagan did for Alzheimer's. And so raising the awareness of the devastating impact of this condition is a really important and necessary thing for these children to begin to lead a normal life. So let's get a little bit into the size of the market.
Hey, John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we had a question come in, and that question is, does the solution work with elderly persons as well?
Currently, we are focused on pediatrics, but we do know that our solution can help with, for example, my mom and dad, who are in their 80s and have incontinence-related issues. One of the things that we know is going to be somewhat of a complexity is that because my mom and dad literally take 2 or 3 cups of pills every day, those pharmaceuticals have a tendency to create a lot of complexity in the biometrics that we gather. And so that's a much more complex solution that we are going to be tackling in the near future. But we feel that there will be an opportunity in that market to address, and that's a 28 million person market. It's about 4 times the size of pediatric enuresis, but a lot more difficult to peel apart some of the biometric patterns and signals.
Got it. Thank you.
You got it. No problem. So when we look at the size of the market of pediatric enuresis, there are about 51 million children in the US ages 5 to 18, and approximately 8.5 million of those children are considered enuretic, and that's the inability to control your urination, or as we more commonly know it, are bedwetters. And when you look at that enuretic children's population, about 4.5 million of them are nighttime only wetters, and about 1.2 million are both nighttime and daytime. And those are really the 2 key areas of the enuretic children's population that we will be addressing at launch. We clearly know that daytime bedwetting represents 1.8 million kids. But again, because of the activity of that child during the day, there's a lot more complexity in terms of understanding what that specific bladder full signal of the body is sending when they're actually out there being active on a jungle gym or in a gym class. So one of the interesting things is about 1 million new cases diagnosed every year, and that's just the US alone. So it's a big, big market. I think families spend roughly about $4.2 billion a year desperately trying to address it and treat it. And so we hope to be a real game changer for these families. So,
John, another question. Sorry to interrupt.
Nope.
One more question has come in. The question is, have you done any testing with PTSD and veterans or sports and athletics in youth?
We have not done anything with PTSDs, although we have had several 20-year-old people in some of our initial studies. One of the things I probably did not mention is that 1% of the population, roughly about 3 million, 4 million people, are enuretic for life. And so we had a 28-year-old man in our study who unfortunately wets his bed every night. And it's, again, a very difficult situation, to say the least, for somebody in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who suffer from this. But we have yet to really look at the PTSD. We have had discussions with the VA for spinal cord victims for catheterization, for cathing them, knowing that they need to be cathed, or if somebody needs to be assisted to the bathroom, being able to notify in advance that they need to go to the bathroom. But again, a potentially big opportunity for us.
Got it. One other question has come in. How much of the issue is considered psychological rather than physical?
Yeah, I will get into that in a little more detail in about 2 slides, but let me sort of say firstly that it really is not a mental or emotional issue per se. It's more of a physiological issue and a maturation issue for that child. but I will get into some details into why does a child wet their bed in a couple of slides.
Great, sounds good.
Okay. Any other questions, Ryan? These are good questions, by the way.
Not at the moment. Looks like that's it for now.
So Ryan wanted me to give you a little bit of some stories about our startup journey. My co-founder and I, Timothy Baker, began in August of 2015, and he had 3 children that were bedwetters. And he saw the current products that were out there on the market, and he felt that, you know, there's got to be a better way to treat these conditions. So we literally spent about 4 months in our local library and at our kitchen table researching, going through probably 500 or 600 research studies and piecing together like a puzzle what were the underlying reasons why a child wets the bed. And if you think about the wearables industry, which is 5, 6 years old, you know, the Fitbits of the world, we began to think about, we know that there are biometric changes happening in the body prior to a child urinating. And with wearables, we felt very strongly that we could identify that pattern using biometric sensor data. So we incorporated in February the next year of 2016, and our first task was recruiting a top-notch C-level team to really drive this business forward. I am a firm believer that, you know, our underlying business model is a great horse, but if you get the right jockey on that horse, you're guaranteed to win the race. So we recruited a very top-notch level team to help drive this business forward. We were really kind of fortunate that we joined a global accelerator network accelerator called Lighthouse Labs. We became part of the Virginia Biotechnology Research Park, probably one of the top 5 research parks in the US. Got a lot of awards, but then we began testing. So we had this idea, we began testing numerous, and you should see we have kind of like a box of all the biometric sensors and wearables that we thought we could use, but the clear winner was the Valencell PerformTech sensor. There was no question in our mind that the fidelity of the data coming off of the PerformTech sensor was significantly better. And all the different heart rate metrics that we would need to really identify this specific urination pattern in children. And what we did to start with, just a little side note, so before we even had children in the studies, we actually went to bed, and before we went to bed, we would sit there in our respective homes and drink a lot of water, and I think our CTO drank a lot of beer, trying to fill our bladders as full as possible, and then we would go to bed. And when we were woken up by our bladder full signal, we would press a little button that said, here's where my body woke me up, and we began to look at the patterns prior to that urination event. And so it was both kind of, you were waking up multiple times throughout the night, but I think our CTO had a lot more fun because he had a lot more beer. But that's where we really started. But to date, we've accumulated tens of thousands of hours of biometric data. And this is 1 Hertz data coming in every second. On scores of children, we had a couple of adults in our study as well. And this gave us the ammunition because we knew that there were patterns that we could identify. What was interesting is that there really was no collective pattern, so you couldn't come up with just one algorithm that would broadly go across the whole population of 8.5 million kids. Every kid has their own unique pattern, but each of these patterns can be identified through our AI machine learning models that we have, and we've built on the Big Table, Google Big Table, BigQuery Cloud as well. This gave us enough ammunition to go get our second big round of funding, and we are scheduled to launch in Q4 of 2018. And what we call our IPass engine, our intelligent predictive alarming system, is achieving about a 75 to 80% predictive dry rate. So keeping these kids dry, 4 out of 5 nights out of a week, which is a real game changer for these children. Let me continue. So what is our solution? Well, I think you first have to start with an understanding of why does a child wet the bed? The child wets the bed because that bladder full signal that you and I recognize in our own bodies is never recognized by that child. And I always give the analogy that if you're in when I was a kid, a long car ride with my father, he would always say, wait 2 more exits, or if you're in a meeting and you need to urinate, that feeling that you feel in your body, we sense it. Unfortunately for a child, they do not. And the interesting thing about the bladder as an organ, it's what I call a binary organ. It's binary in 2 ways. When the bladder's filling up, it's binary in terms of either filling up or it's expelling a liquid. It's either in an on fill up stage or an expulsion stage, whereas most of the other organs in the body are more tonic in nature, more sinusoidal. And so the bladder, when it fills up, sends a signal to the brain, to your central nervous system. That's the signal that you and I recognize and prompts us to go to the bathroom. Or in the evening case, in the nighttime enuresis, it wakes you up and you go to the bathroom. And I think as you get older, it becomes more of an issue. However, that child, because that bladder to brain pathway is the last really neural pathway to develop, and it's a behaviorally conditioned neural pathway, not unlike learning how to throw a baseball, how to walk, how to talk. You have to train your muscles and your neural physiology to really recognize that signal. So what the bladder does, the other reason it's binary, is that it sends a signal to the base of the spine, to your autonomic system. And it sends that signal to your autonomic system saying, you're not recognizing that signal, so we are going to force a urination on you to get rid of this waste product. And so that's how an accidental urination happens. And again, 1% of the population lives, unfortunately, physiologically, with the inability to recognize, mostly at night, that central nervous system ping from the bladder that it's full. So what are the current treatment options? I like to call this you can either do drugs or diapers. The drugs that are out there are DDAVP or desmopressin. They range in price or cost per family from anywhere from $100 to $300 a month. It's a $1 billion drug, but again, it only masks the problem. Once it basically suppresses your urination system. And when you go off the drug, there's a 90% relapse rate back into your anuretic state. So it's what we call a Band-Aid. Diapers are similar. Some doctors will say it's really enabling the condition. It's making the child not really try to recognize that signal, and in some ways enables the condition. And diapers leak 10 to 15% of the time anyway, too. And they, again, do not do anything to cure the underlying condition. On the far right side, you can go to what they call an enuretic clinic, which is $2,000 to $5,000. What they typically do is give you that middle, they give you diapers, they might give you drugs, but they'll also give what's called an enuretic alarm. And an enuretic alarm is one of 2 things. It's either a bed pad that sits underneath your sheets on your bed, and when you wet, it alarms. And in so doing, there's some studies that have shown that it helps to reinforce that neural pathway. It has initially some pretty good results, but a very high relapse rate of around 50%, making it only 25% effective. And so when you go to a clinic, it's usually cost prohibitive for most families. Typically is not covered by any insurance. And so when you look at these alarms, which is again a billion-dollar market, multi-billion-dollar market, diapers are about a $2.5 billion market. All told, it's about a 4.2, $4.5 billion market. So
Jon,
what we did, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to interrupt. We had one other question come in, if I may. Could the bladder signal, I think this is from the previous slide when you were explaining the physiological processes, could the bladder signal be quote unquote blocked by other events occurring in the body?
I think I understand the question. I don't know specifically. I have not had that question before. Typically, if it gets I get a little bit more into the physiology. That bladder to brain to central nervous system neural pathway goes through what they call the prefrontal cortex of the child. That's the front portion of your brain. That's the last part of your brain to develop. And it, in some ways, is akin to a router for a computer network or your home for your Wi-Fi. And that router that's the last thing of your body to kind of mature. And so it's misrouted, it's lost, that signal's kind of lost there. And that signal from the prefrontal cortex goes to the middle section of the brain called the pons area of the brain, where the control for you of your central nervous system, through your central nervous system of your bladder, takes place. That's where your body tells your bladder to relax and not to expel, to hold it so that you can actually, and I can actually sleep through the night without necessarily having to get up. But I don't know if it's blocked. There are some physiological things that, we looked at that previous slide, about 1 million of the 8.5 million do have physiological, physical things that prevent them from controlling their bladder. And that's not something that we necessarily are addressing at the front end. A lot of times surgery is required for that. It's usually something wrong with the bladder or the urethra.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what we did is, with all this testing of all these things and finding out that Balance Cell's PerformTech technology really was hands down giving us the highest fidelity data, we combined that with our AI machine learning engine in the cloud to build what we call our IPass Engine that enables us to alarm that child at the bedside and wake them up before they actually wet the bed. Our system and our AI engine can identify in advance that that child is going to wet their bed, which enables us to wake them up and get them into the bed. And at the same time, it enables us to send a notification to the parent's phone to have them also go and assist their child to the bedroom. One of the things that is underlying kind of this whole condition is about half the children are deep sleepers. And that's also to do with the neurological maturation of the brain. And so oftentimes, even though you will have the alarm going off at the bedside before they've urinated, having that parent as a backstop to go help that child wake up and get to the bathroom prevents what we call a wetting accident. It keeps them dry. One of the real game changers is keeping that child dry. Not only helps build self-esteem and helps them lead an ordinary life to a degree, but it also reinforces and behaviorally conditions that neural pathway. Everybody probably is familiar with the whole Pavlov's dog. And if you ring the bell and give the dog a bone, and the dog will salivate. And if you do that enough times, you can actually just ring the bell and that dog will still salivate. And you can bring that same dog back months later and ring the bell and that dog will still salivate. So we're not only keeping the child dry, but we're accelerating the behavioral conditioning of that neural pathway, enabling them to hopefully be dry for life and to accelerate the learning of that behavioral, that neurological link between the bladder and the brain. So what was it about the balance? So let me go a little more deeper into the Balancell PerformTech sensor and why we felt it was the sensor for us to use. Again, all the testing we did was against what we call the reference polar band. And so in every single study that we looked at, we always were comparing it against this reference sample. And only Balancell's band was able to attenuate at about a 90% heart rate metric efficiency. All the different heart rate metrics that come off of the Balancell sensor. When we looked at different efficiency measures and effectiveness measures, there was a clear benchmark, and I'm talking in some instances, orders of magnitudes better performance in the Balancell sensor. The other key thing is that they have really simple, easy API standards-based integration. And we actually are running these bands. You know, the child could go to bed at 9 and wake up at 9 the next morning, 12-hour duty cycle. And it was the only one that really could maintain a continuous duty cycle performance and not have battery drain, not have degradation in performance, whether that's caused by the MCU, the microcontroller, or the LEDs. It's also, again, this is pervasive across pediatric enuresis, is pervasive across the population. And in some instances, for example, in some of the Jewish populations, the enuresis rate is about 75%. In the Scandinavian countries, enuresis rate is about 50%. In the Middle East, where people have darker skin, again, it approximates 75%. So we tested it on multiple skin types. We wore it on different parts of the body, the upper arm, the forearm, the wrist, the calf. And regardless of where we placed it on the body, we were able to get really high fidelity data. One of the things that PPG technology has had some issues with that I think Balancell is really on the forefront is maintaining heart rate metric fidelity in a motion, during motion. Again, if you think of our specific application, we are at night where the child is in bed, and at a point in time when they go to sleep, their heart rate metrics become like a smooth Canadian still lake. And when that bladder full signal begins to emerge, it's like throwing a big rock in the middle of that lake and it ripples out. But even throughout the night, through the different REM cycles, through tossing and turning, you do have significant motion. And that motion tolerance of the Balancell band was something that was really, really important for us to maintain the fidelity of the data, and also having over-the-air update capability. And lastly, I think what was really great for us is literally from initial concept to manufacturing. Balancell provided significant engineering support, made several trips out of Raleigh to come up to visit us in Virginia to help out with technical issues and resolve some technical things that we were trying to overcome, and linked us up with manufacturing in China. So from the very beginning, when we bought their original benchmark orange sort of test kit, all the way through to where we're now producing our bands in China for our launch in Q4, they were supportive throughout the whole way, and truly a partnership, which again, for a startup is really, really critically important. So when we look at the power of biometric data, again, you have all these different biometrics that change throughout time, throughout the evening. And leveraging all of these different biometrics, we can actually identify when that child's going to urinate. And our machine learning engines in the cloud really continuously improve the predictive accuracy. In some cases, as little as 6 days of being on the system, we are able to begin predicting fairly accurately when that child is going to urinate in advance. Typically, it's about a 2 to 4 week learning process for us to be able to have that 70 to 75% accuracy. And again, we feel that some of this data, somebody mentioned geriatric incontinence, there is potty training, the 16 million kids going through potty training. But this is the sort of the bedrock, the backbone of our system, is leveraging all of these different biometrics. On the next slide, let me kind of show you what you're seeing here. On that top slide, the top half of the slide, you see heart rate. And on the bottom is sort of a visualization of the biometric alarming system in the cloud that we use, our IPass Engine. And this is an actual anuretic child taken about 5 minutes before they actually urinate. And you can see that as the heart rate, is changing, that our biometric IPass Engine, that red bar on the left, begins to elevate in intensity. It's like a threshold alarm for us. And this is what we see. Again, every model is different for every kid. The framework's the same, but the parameters are really quite different. And being able to build individual models for individual kids is something that we think is really kind of novel and unique. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And a lot of things go into that. Again, we look at all the heart rate metrics, motion, sleep duration, severity of PE, age and gender, weight, all have impacts and are parameters in our model. This next one is it's a truncated video from our website. If you're interested, you can go to www.mygogoband.com to see the 3.5-minute full video. But we'd like to share with you a little bit what
GOGO Band's Wi-Fi enabled intelligent predictive alert system analyzes key biometric data points in real time, using state-of-the-art learning technology to actively identify and map your child's unique bladder full signature. GOGO Band knows before your child knows they need to go.
So I wanted to play that just because, again, you're addressing a consumer market. And one of the important things for a family is trying to reduce the complexity of what we're actually doing in the background, what's happening behind the curtain, and make it more tangible and relevant and understandable for that family. So just an example of kind of how we are communicating to the consumer, that our system knows before your kid knows that they need to go to bed. One of the things that really is important, again, we talked about, is in today's world, in the millennial world, parents are connected all the time. And so we built what we call our parent app, which is both on the Android and iOS platform, that provides detailed progress reports on how their child is doing through time. It has an expert knowledge base to provide them with coaching tips. We are going to continue to build that functionality out. But as an example, if your child has been dry for 2 weeks and all of a sudden had a wedding event, what do you do as a parent? And having an automated system to provide expert advice to that parent in real time is what we feel is very, very important for the parent. It's what a parent would expect. This AI to human link, one of the things that I think is a broader story is that with wearables and with sensor technology, what we're really doing, and I think where the whole AI healthcare and AI biometric IoT healthcare marketplace is moving, is creating that AI human link in a really positive, impactful manner. And in our case, it's taking and mapping one organ of the autonomic system and providing that child and that family the ability to understand what that child's autonomic system is actually doing at a point in time. There's a lot of research going into mapping of the genome, a lot of research dollars, billions of dollars being thrown at cancer research, billions of dollars being thrown at mapping the brain. The autonomic system puts out about 3 trillion electrical impulse synapse signals every second. And being able to peel apart that bladder signal from all that noise out there for us is something that we consider really a fundamental innovation in the AI human link and creating a really positive impact for both the kids and their families.
Hey, John, it's Ryan again. Yes. Sorry to interrupt. We've had a few questions come in now that are relevant here. First one is, did you guys work with a machine learning group or consultancy to help develop your machine learning system?
Well, we are we built our platform on Google, and Google has selected us as one of their sort of like, they have a program for startups, which we applied to. And they have 3 different levels. You can get like a couple of $1,000 and it helps you offset your expenses for the Google Cloud. They have the second level, which I believe is called the Spark program for startups, which is a $20,000 grant to you, to their Google dollars. And through that, you do get some technical support, pretty low level, but they have what is a kind of a fairly exclusive cadre of startup companies from around the globe. It's called the Surge program, and that's where they give you 100,000 Google dollars, and they provide you deep technical and architectural support. Where we built the majority of our models is that we recruited an individual called Dr. Kenneth Zhu, who I knew when I worked at Capital One. I was one of the original guys at Capital One back in the early 90s, and he was considered the godfather of big data at Capital One. And at the time, he joined our company and really jump-started the whole big data machine learning algorithms that we use. So we actually recruited somebody who we knew was incredibly competent. What we're doing is what they call rare event big data modeling, meaning that you're trying to pick out 1 out of a million signals. It's kind of like fraud detection at a bank, and that's a whole different branch of big data from neural networks. And so we actually recruited a guy who spent a ton of time in collaboration with us and with our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Israel Franco, who runs the Yale's Children's Continence Center up at Yale University, really the world's leading research institute for children's continence-related issues. So we hired our own staff, but being a part of the Google Surge program has certainly helped.
Good stuff. Thanks, John. A couple other questions that have come in. Where to find evidence of the individualized model performance? Not quite sure I follow that, but I think questions around evidence of personalizing the individual model performance.
Yeah, I think that's straddling on 2 areas probably, I think. One is kind of our secret sauce. And what evidence do you have or can you provide us that the secret sauce is actually building individual models for children? Don't want to give up our secret sauce, but I think that one of the things that, we have thought about is that if you have a system that has been built and fine-tuned and built a model for a specific child, Enuresis and Enuresis or bedwetting runs in families. If your mother or father was anuretic, there's about a 50% chance that your children will be. If both your mother and father are anuretic, there's about a 70 to 80% chance that your children will be. So there's a genetic link there. So one of the things that you do is you look, okay, if we built a model for Timmy, and that system is tuned to Timmy, and then you try and put it on, Bobby, that model will not work for Bobby. So that's kind of an indirect kind of indication. But in terms of efficacy, one of the things that we definitely will be doing is clinical trials. We are a Class 2 FDA pre-cleared device. We're going out initially as a lifestyle device to keep these children dry and help accelerate their recognition of their signal. But clearly, we want to be able to have clinical validation for this. That's important. The first place a family goes to is the internet, of course, looking for solutions. But the second, really an important place they go to is their pediatrician, and in some cases, pediatric urologists. And those pediatricians and pediatric urologists are going to need clinical validations and studies in order to recommend our product. And that is our game plan. It's what we are driving towards.
Well, Jon, you've anticipated the next question, which is, are any of the study results published at this point?
Not yet.
Got it. Okay. That's all the question. Oh, I'm sorry. We just had one other question come in.
Mm-hmm.
How many samples did you guys try, and what was the success rate, and how much was the accuracy rate?
I think I understand the question. Scores of children, tens of thousands of hours of data. I think we've generated petabytes of data, billions of models, and what was the second part of the question there, Ryan?
The accuracy rate in the models you've seen.
Yeah, we have seen at least a 75% dry rate is what we are targeting for these children. And that's what we see currently in the performance of our models. We continue, I think the longer a child is on the system, again, the more accurate that becomes. Again, each child, when we run a child initially, we look at over 8 million models for that specific child. And our machine learning engine picks one of those, and the next day comes in and it reruns the data and picks another model, but we see it begin to converge or asymptote. So we hope to continue to improve that 75%.
Got it. Okay. And we've had a couple of other questions come in as you were answering that one. What's your estimated time to completion for FDA compliance for clinical integration and reimbursement?
Well, from the clinical trial perspective, it'll be sometime probably next year that we will really formalize that with an IRB. The second part of your question, Ryan, was what?
I think that answered it. It was compliance for clinical integration and reimbursement.
Yeah, you really want to drive an IRB. We will probably do some type of NIH study as well. But in terms of really getting complete FDA compliance or FDA approval, we're going at it as a lifestyle product initially to test the market. So that's kind of our time frame.
Got it. And then the second question was, are you looking to provide an API/SDK for your software platform?
Not at this point. We are standards-based. We are built on APIs, but I'm not sure whether we're not sure from a market strategy and a market penetration strategy what we'll do. One of the things is we built a system that has its own bedside tablet to alarm the child, again, trying to control that user experience. And a lot of these children, particularly in the younger ages, although it's getting younger and younger, do not have cell phones. So just doing the app play for us, we felt was not a viable solution. One of the things that we anticipate hopefully doing is that when a child is, quote, no longer a bedwetter, is opening up that tablet so that we provide that child with a mini computer that they can then use as kind of a bonus for being a part of our system.
Got it. That's it for now. Great questions. Keep them coming.
Great questions. So one of the things for a startup that's really important, I'll just gloss on this, is getting your IP portfolio in shape. Everything from your trademarks to your URLs, but also patenting. We have 2 patent pending non-provisional patents at the USPTO for, you can see, urination prediction and monitoring, and a bedwetting training device and method with a priority date going back to 2016. And again, our roadmap going forward, this is just a high-level roadmap of showing you from founding to where we are today and where we expect to go into the future. And again, we are going to do a pre-launch campaign here in Q4 and a national product launch next year, with new product extension going on the following year. That's our roadmap. So again, this year we're going to be doing it's what we call a pre-launch in Q4 2018. And again, you can see we're smart, safe, and dry. So at the end of the day, as a close here on the sort of presentation, is this is a really noble endeavor. And one of the things that we are absolutely focused in on, and it's one of the gratifying things of, this is now my 6th startup, is really focusing in on children and families, and eventually, potentially geriatric, the senior citizens of the world. And so when we look at it, children and senior citizens are 2 of the most vulnerable populations, around. And so getting up every morning, knowing that your hard work is really improving dramatically the lives of children, really keeps us energized and focused on really crafting a solution that'll do that for them and their families. So that's the end of the formal presentation. Any other questions?
Well, first of all, thanks, Jon, for all the insights. That you guys are doing some great work, and really glad to see the progress so far, and look forward to future success as well. We have a few more questions that have come in. First one is, how successful are you predicting, quote, in time, and how fast does the success rate raise the longer you run on an individual?
Two good questions. We typically let me start again. When you alarm is really important. Clearly, when you think of the classic statistical confusion matrix, if you alarm after the fact, you missed it. However, if you alarm too far in advance of the actual wedding event, you really are missing it as well. So we are trying to optimize our system to recognize an alarm within that first 60 minutes prior to the actual urination event. The sweet spot for us is about 10 to 15 minutes prior to the urination event, which gives them enough time to get to the bathroom. And in terms of how does the predictive accuracy improve as we gather more data, I'm real hesitant to give a specific kind of pathway from a initial first day of data reading to when you have 30 days of data. We know that in that 2 to 4 weeks, we can predict at a 75% dry rate, we do see better performance. Sometimes we see 95% dry rate on some children. So it does improve, and as our algorithms get better and better, which we continually refine, we expect that the initial starting point will hopefully be above 70-75%, and that they will maintain after a month or two on the system at the 90% dry rate factor. That's our goal.
Great stuff. One other question has come in. Any plans for Europe?
Yes, absolutely. We've done all the filings of the patents in Europe, getting that sort of place in line. Europe's an interesting market. In the States, our product can be covered by most health savings accounts or FSAs. In Europe, it's actually covered, our product would be covered by all the major national healthcare systems. There are warehouses in the UK that literally have thousands of bedwetting alarms, enuretic alarms that are shipping out every day. And again, it is scripted by the doctor. In the States, it is yet to be at that point other than for the drugs. And I think a lot of that is because the clinical validation of their devices has not really presented itself as something that the insurance companies feel would really help that provide that kind of level of efficacy to the child. So in Europe, you do have the GDPR, right, which makes it more complex. There's a lot of uncertainty as to what that does for an AI healthcare platform like us. We are HIPAA compliant here in the States. In Europe, there's a lot more complexity, and it is across the ocean, but it is a market that we know is a significant market, as big, if maybe not bigger than the US.
Got it. Well, it looks like that's it for the questions per se. I will share that we've had several people chime in and just say thanks for sharing all this information. And one in particular I'll share said, this is a fantastic initiative and product. It really does provide a solution to a major known issue. Congratulations. So I'll second that certainly, and want to say thanks again, Jon, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this. And I think this has been really, really valuable, and hopefully everyone who attended found it valuable as well. I think that's certainly indicated by the number of questions and the quality of questions we got.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and again, I'm looking forward to the next 5 years and the dramatic changes that the AI healthcare market is going to bring to the treatment for all sorts of chronic illnesses and diseases. So really very gratified. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. I am not seeing any other questions that have come in. So, and we are coming up to the top of the hour. So I'll just say thanks everyone for attending today. Hopefully it was a valuable session for you. Feel free to reach out to Jon or myself for any follow-up questions or any more information you might like. And like I said before, we will be sending out links to the recording of this webinar and to the slides as follow-up. So with that, we will go ahead and sign off, and have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thanks again.
Thanks.